John, congratulations on your new book. Let me get that into shot. Start before you're ready. As soon as I heard about this book, I immediately thought, wow, what a great message. There are some great books out there like Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway and Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. These sort of rather iconic books that give you the message on the cover and then, of course, help you go about fulfilling that message in the pages therein. So this is a great idea. I love it. Absolutely love it. I can relate to it personally. I'm sure everybody can relate to this one. Tell me a little bit about why you decided to write Start Before You're Ready.
Yeah, it really, was a challenge that I had throughout my entire life. And for so many years, I was holding myself back, kind of waiting to be ready. I was waiting for more confidence or waiting for more qualifications or just kind of waiting to feel calm and completely ready. And I didn't know that was happening for a lot of my life. And then when I started realizing that maybe I'm never going to feel ready until I take the step, and I started getting out of my comfort zone and doing stuff that would challenge me and getting really uncomfortable, then I realized that, the way to become ready is to take the step. And so I started doing lots of different things to practice that. And experienced a lot of freedom. There's discomfort along the journey, and but then on the other side of that is what we want. And there were a few kind of tools and insights that I discovered that I was just really excited about sharing. And then the writing this book was my way to offer that to the world and help people that, if you're there and you're waiting to feel ready and you're waiting for something to take the step, I just want to show you that you're ready now, before you need anything else.
Yeah, and you've done a great job with the book, John. When somebody comes to you and they're telling you they don't feel ready, what do you tell them?
First off, I say that feeling is absolutely normal and natural. There's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't mean that you're not ready or there's anything wrong with you. It's a perfect part of the human experience. But it's how you respond to that feeling.
Hmm.
And when you're feeling not ready, like how do you approach life? Do you feel like you want to attack it and go towards it, or do you want to move backwards from it? And I think when we change the meaning, the understanding of not feeling ready, that it's not a sign just to stop or that you're not prepared. It's actually something to lean into. It can help them shift their perspective on what that really means.
Yeah, I love that. So rather than taking it as an order, I'm not ready, you turn
Yeah.
it into a conversation and you start to lean into it, as you say, and begin to explore, I guess ultimately, well, then how can we get ready?
Yeah, it's same as fear, right? Fear comes up and it's a signal. It's
Mm.
signaling us towards something. And typically you might think, well, something's scary, then maybe I should run away from it. Or if I'm not ready, then maybe I shouldn't do it. But if we're taking that at face value, we're missing so much more. And it's such a paradox. It's so backwards to the way that our brain is kind of feeding us the information that, yeah, once you get into that conversation and you explore it, why am I not ready, or what am I thinking about myself or about the situation that's causing me to feel that way, and how might that shift if I start to think about it differently or take a different approach?
Hmm. So it seems to me like you've also reversed the equation somewhat in that for many of us, myself included, you sort of think to yourself, well, when I feel confident, then I can begin, or when the courage finally arrives, then I can begin. Whereas what I've read, from your message, it's no, wait a minute, you've got to begin and the confidence can start to flow. You've got to begin and the courage comes. It's sort of that way around.
Yeah, somebody I spoke with a few months ago, and they wanted to have the confidence to go networking, and they said, well, I don't feel confident networking and speaking to people in the room. And they were waiting until they felt confident to go up and have those conversations. But my question was, well, what if you didn't need confidence to go
Hmm.
and do it? What would that be like? And they're like, well, I could just go and do it. I can go and have the conversation. And it's that confidence isn't something we need to go and start the thing. You actually go and do it. And anything that you do and you repeatedly do it over time, eventually you build some competence and some skills and some experience. and then you feel confident afterwards. So
Mm.
one thing I really discovered was that rather than I have to be this confident person and why am I not confident and when will I ever be confident, it's you don't actually need it. You just go and do the thing and then you get confidence from doing it. So those feelings of feeling you're experiencing doubt, you're feeling uncertain, you're feeling a little bit unsure. That's absolutely exactly what you're going to be feeling going in.
Mm.
So it's
Yeah.
just completely shifting what that means. And so, all right, I don't feel ready. I'm not meant to. That's okay. I'll go and do it. And then ultimately afterwards, I'm going to be ready.
I really like though that you lean in towards the feeling. Um, and I think, once we get to lean in towards the feeling, we can learn more about where that feeling comes from, because sometimes that feeling, for example, may have some wisdom to it. Um, for example, I'm thinking sometimes we don't feel ready to begin because we're trying to do it all by ourselves, and actually we need some extra help right now. And that's why we don't feel ready to begin. So sometimes there's wisdom, I think, in the sense that we're not ready to begin. We've got to investigate and understand what the message is really telling us.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of our feelings as well. They are they're giving us a great amount of information, a great amount of wisdom. And when we're disconnected from that, we're disconnected from our wisdom and our experience. And quite often when we don't feel ready, it's because the thing we're about to do is going to bring up an uncomfortable feeling. It might bring up some guilt or some embarrassment, or might feel afraid. And
Mm.
so rather than feel that feeling, we can rationalize it of I'm not ready, or I'm not maybe that's not for me, or I shouldn't do it. And noticing that that feeling is actually something to be experienced, and something to be felt, moving into it, we then start to understand, I wonder what I'm thinking about myself that's causing me to feel that way.
Yeah.
And then you go through it and you get the experience, and then you either learn to feel that feeling rather than it being something that's really terrifying. I don't want to feel that feeling. This is what I had with embarrassment. I didn't want to feel embarrassed. So I would put off anything that I might be embarrassed about. And that's when I wouldn't feel ready, or I wouldn't feel confident, or I would be shy. And then when I lent into being shy or lent into being embarrassed, I realized that my brain was just trying to protect me from feeling an uncomfortable feeling. But then if you're willing to feel that, you get a whole new experience that shows you parts of yourself you didn't even know existed.
Yeah. I often feel that, who we think we are isn't ready to begin, but who we really are is ready, and it can do this, and in the sense when you're starting a new project, maybe you're writing a new book, you're setting up a new business, you're dating again, whatever it is, the self you take yourself to be often doesn't feel enough. Yeah, but it's only by doing it that you realize that you're more than who you think you are. Yeah, that you're capable of more than you can imagine at this point. So I guess, when we're growing, in a way, we're always going to feel not ready enough to begin with. But the point of growth is that we can somehow grow through that feeling, take it with us and do the thing that we're called to do.
Yeah, I think that's where, for me, imposter syndrome comes from. It's you're doing something new that you've never done before, and you've still got this identity of the person who hasn't done that.
Mm.
And so as you're taking the step and you're feeling like this isn't me, it you feel like out of place. It doesn't feel quite like yourself.
Mm.
Yet by stepping into that, you actually become the new person. You play a new role that you haven't played before, and then if you play that role for long enough, then that becomes familiar, and that becomes the new you. But then it also becomes the seal or the cap for what's next for you, and then you're going
Mm.
to feel like an imposter as you take that step. So even feeling like an imposter, it's not a sign that you're not capable or you can't do it. It's
Yeah.
just a sign that your old identity hasn't caught up with your new one yet.
Whenever you like read the biographies or autobiographies of the great artists, through the centuries, the great mystics, the great thinkers, you discover that they've all experienced self-doubt. they've all gone through passages where they felt that they were all dried up and there was nothing left to offer, and that was the end of that. There's a really moving passage in Movable Feast, Ernest Hemingway's book, where he is talking about how when he begins to write, essentially those fears, those doubts arise in him that this time it won't happen. And it's very moving, actually. He's so vulnerable in the sharing of that experience. And then he says, I tell myself in those moments, all I need to do is write one true sentence at a time. And that seems to be the key for him in terms of them being ready enough to begin. And I think it is really moving to hear of these stories, because it reminds us that, we're not the only one experiencing this type of feeling. Actually, it's sort of part of the human condition, really.
Yeah, and it's easy to see people that are really successful or have produced amazing work, and you just look at the finished article and the
Mm.
finished product, but you don't see them starting in the beginning when they had
Yeah,
no clue or no understanding and they were scared and they didn't know. We just see that end result and then compare ourselves starting something new with someone who's completely at the end, and it
yeah,
creates this massive gap when ultimately, if you're continuing to expand and grow, you're going to feel completely unsure and out of place and like not knowing what you're doing in the beginning. And that is just a sign that you're growing, and it's uncomfortable and it's vulnerable. Um, but if we allow ourselves to feel that without judging ourselves,
yeah.
then ultimately you kind of get used to being uncomfortable a little bit more. And in each area, you get more comfortable in it, and then you start the next one.
Yeah. Maya Angelou said, being a natural writer is a little bit like being a natural heart surgeon. It's like there's no such thing. You have to just start writing, and you have to learn your craft. And you have to put those hours in. And if you were waiting and you were waiting to be ready to write, yeah, then it could be a very, very long wait. So at some point, yeah, you've got to put your pen on the page and give it a go. So there's a certain amount of I guess faith involved in that, some willpower in there as well. But what about also help? I mean, like asking for help, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so important because what we can try and convince ourselves is that we can do it all on our own.
Mm,
And it's vulnerable and it's uncomfortable to ask for help because part of us, the paradox of this is part of us believes, well, I should be ready. I should be perfect. I should know it all from the beginning. And then once you get going and you get in there and you realize what you don't know or what you need to learn, that's when it can be the time where just admitting to ourselves, yeah, I'm ready to start, but there's also a lot that I need to learn. When I was writing the book Start Before You're Ready, I got going. I was really excited, and then I got into it, and then the ideas were coming out. And then I'm like, how do I structure this? How do I put this in a way that makes sense for people? And then I worked with a really amazing editor, and she would give me feedback, and I'd send the first chapter off, and then it would come back with all of these different edits in it, and all of these different corrections and criticisms. And my ego took a hit, and I'm like, oh, maybe I'm not that good at writing. Maybe I should quit. And then I send the second chapter off, and then that would come back with a whole load of different edits
mm,
again and changes and criticisms. And then the third one went off, and then I got the same coming back. The fourth one went off, the same coming back. It was only after 5 chapters that she said, "Do you know what? I think you're just starting to get it now." And I was
yeah,
just getting the flow of how to
beautiful.
structure it and how
Yeah.
to put it out. And it took a long time. And then even at that point, it didn't mean I got it. It just meant I'd taken that next step forward. So the journey is like you're always having to learn something new within the thing that you're doing, and other
Yes.
people are going to give you that feedback, and they're going to help you along the journey to
Yeah.
get better at it. And having being willing to let them see where you're not ready,
Mm,
and where you need to learn those steps, helps you grow. But again, it's uncomfortable. We're wanting to either go along, I'm not ready, I'm not going to start, or I'm ready and I'm perfect and I don't need to improve at all. And they're two extremes when you don't feel ready, but you take the step, you just allow yourself to get in there and get messy and explore and experiment, rather than just having to do it all perfectly.
Yeah, well, hey, perfectionism. I mean, there we are, right there, aren't we, as well? That's another, I think we set up these standards for ourselves sometimes, which are often impossible to meet. My feeling is, when I'm mentoring people and coaching people these days is the first thing I say is always be willing to start small. You don't need to do the big splash. Quite honestly, every major project that I've been a part of in my life had a very, very small start. I think of my first clinic when I set up a clinic on the National Health Service in Birmingham, all the way back in 1989. We put the posters up. We were hoping for a big crowd. 11 o'clock that morning, the doors opened and nobody was there. And nobody. Yeah. 11 minutes later, 11:11, two people showed up. Yeah. Two people showed up. It turns out they weren't meaning to come to my clinic. They just wandered in. We got chatting. They thought I was a nice young man. They decided to stay. I mean, that was the beginning of a 3-year project called Stress Busters. I wrote a book. There was a BBC documentary. There was all sorts of things that came on after that. That's a really small start. And I think sometimes we put a lot of pressure on ourselves that when we're ready to begin, there's got to be a fanfare, there's got to be a crowd, there's got to be TV cameras. This is the moon's got to be in alignment with Saturn, and Saturn's got to be in alignment with Jupiter, and goodness knows what else. But I have to say I'm a really big fan of a small start.
Yeah, I love the small star idea because it's just such a bridge into getting to where we want to go. And if we have to do it perfectly or start grandly in the beginning, it's so overwhelming that that's when we put it off for so long. When if it is small and you get in there, then you're doing it and you're getting experience and you're getting feedback and you're understanding it and then you're improving versus delaying it and putting it off. And it's
Yeah,
yeah, it's so easy to overwhelm and try and do it all at once.
yeah. Another thing I've noticed in my process is that I'll get an idea, maybe an idea for a book or an idea for a course or an idea for some sort of a retreat or a project. And the idea is there. And then for a little while, it goes away. And in the past, I used to think I was procrastinating. But actually, what I've learned is that there is an incubation period sometimes with ideas. They land. And then it's like you put them in the oven and they just need to cook for a little while in your unconscious. And I've found that in those moments or those stretches of time, not to accuse myself of procrastinating, not to accuse myself of not going fast enough, but trusting that something is still building, and there still comes a point where I then have to say to myself, am I ready enough? I mean, that's my mantra. Am I ready enough? Not entirely ready, but just ready enough. So I also just wondered what your thoughts are about that, because I do think sometimes there is wisdom in a little bit of an incubation period, to let something land before you proceed.
Yeah, I really like the nuance of it because it's so easy to go black and white and say, well, I'm either ready or I'm not ready, or just like the moment you want to do it, you have to go. There is a time and a place for that, but there's also seeing it on a bit of a spectrum. And I think the idea of being ready enough is really important. And for me, I like to use like the 80% rule of that, of like when I feel 80% ready, then I
Nice.
will launch it or I'll do the thing. And I quite often tell clients or people that I'm working with, I will send an email when it's 80% ready. And sometimes it might have typos in it or whatever, because if I try and make an email or a project or something I'm doing 100% perfect, that
Hmm.
100% never ends. It becomes this trap that I keep going into. So if
Yeah.
it's ready enough, for me, it's
Yes.
80%. If I'm working with a real perfectionist,
Hmm.
I'm happy to cap that at 90%
Yeah.
because it's too uncomfortable to go to 80. But we each
Yeah.
have a comfortability
Yeah.
on what that percentage is. For someone who's a bit more chilled, they might go, do you know, it's 50% ready. Let's go. Let's get in there, get messy. But you just
Yeah.
take it away from 100% and realize,
Yeah.
that perfect doesn't exist. But if we're just ready, I like how you describe it as ready enough, and you
Hmm.
find out what that is for you.
Yeah.
And now you're really cooking because
Yeah.
you can get into. practicing things a lot quicker.
There was a project that I created a few years back called the Happiness Project, and in the beginning, I honestly didn't really know what it was. All I knew was that I wanted to change the orientation of my work. As a psychologist, I'd been trained essentially to look at unhappiness and everything that's wrong with us. And it became clear to me that in my training, really, we had never really looked at wellness. We'd never really looked at happiness. So I set up the Happiness Project. And the mission statement that we used to begin with was simply talk happiness. Let's talk happiness. Let's start a conversation. And I found that to be really helpful because I couldn't set myself up as an expert in happiness. I wasn't an expert. I didn't know anything about it. I had no training in it. I hadn't, I'd thought about it a bit. But in my profession, which is psychology, we weren't looking at happiness. I'm talking now about 1994, 1995. But there was something about just saying, I'm going to start a conversation. And that took the pressure off. Because I know how to hold a conversation. And in holding a conversation, then the Happiness Project began to take form and it revealed itself to me. Yeah, as I went into it, it revealed itself to me. I learned about it as I kept taking a step forward. And I think this is, again, one of the great keys to readiness is that the reward for readiness is that you get educated, you get informed as to what you're about as you go along, as you do it.
Yeah, I love that. And it really points to the fact that you can spend so long trying to think about how it should be, plan it all out, and then you go and do it and you realize it's not the thing that you wanted to do, or that there's so much more that you needed to learn. It would be like reading all the manuals on riding a bike before riding a bike when ultimately you get on and the best way to learn is to ride it.
Great.
All of that information and wisdom that you get and feedback can't exist before you actually start.
Yeah.
Which is why so much of it is just backwards, and it's going against that instinct to want to have all the answers first, or want to know everything first, or figure it out, and just letting ourselves be vulnerable enough to take that step.
Yeah, I'm so happy you've written the book. I feel like we're living in an age now where more than ever before, we all of us need to express ourselves. We all of us need to speak our truth, share our message, participate in helping a world that's ailing quite clearly at present. And I think the message in this book is so wholesome and it's so on point, and it really speaks to, I think, a universal truth, which is that if you practice readiness, there will be inspiration, there will be grace, there will be support. Joseph Campbell, the creator of The Hero's Journey, talked about supernatural aid. He said, if you're willing to cross the threshold at the beginning of a new journey, there will be supernatural aid there to meet you. It doesn't come before you cross the threshold, unfortunately. You've got to start taking the steps. But when you do, magically, assistance will appear and you will be helped. And maybe some of that help for some people will be your book. So well done. Great job. And I just hope this book lands on the laps of everyone who's meant to read it. And it will support them in their purpose and their journey and their expression of who they are.
Thank you. Thanks so much for joining me, Robert. Really appreciate it.